Um, cool. So let's start. Who here has heard of Litecoin? That's good. Okay, so just in case you don't know what Litecoin is, just a quick summary. Open source fork of Bitcoin has 4 times the number of coins, and it's a quarter the block confirmation time, so 2.5 minutes as opposed to 10 minutes, and it uses script proof of work as opposed to SHA-256. It's commonly known as silver to Bitcoin's gold. It was launched October 13, 2011, so about 5.5 years ago. And today it's $6 per Litecoin, plus or minus $1 or two, and $300 million market cap. So after Litecoin, there was a huge altcoin explosion, and I think this image was, I downloaded it like 3 years ago. Now it's like 10 times or 100 times more, as many coins and tokens. And it's pretty easy for you to actually launch a new coin now. There's something called like buildacoin.in where you just type in like your parameters and then click build, and then it'll just like create the source and let you download the source, and you can do whatever you want with it. But back then, when I created Litecoin, there were let me see. There were like I think these were like the only coins, altcoins out there before I created Litecoin. So I'm gonna go back and talk about like back then, like when these coins launched, what happened, what's special about them, and then give you guys an idea of what, like, I guess what my mindset was when I created Litecoin. So, like a lot of these coins don't even exist anymore. So the first one is Namecoin. It was launched in April of 2011. It's basically trying to do decentralized DNS using .bit domain names. It has the same proof of work as Bitcoin. So the problem with that is it was competing with Bitcoin for miners. So when Namecoin price is high, Bitcoin, a lot of Bitcoin miners would start mining Namecoin because it was more profitable to mine Namecoin, sell it for Bitcoin, and they make more Bitcoin that way. And then, as you know how Bitcoin's difficulty works, every 2 weeks it adjusts. So 2 weeks later, all of a sudden the difficulty will jump 4 times, and then it become really unprofitable to mine Namecoin, and then everyone will go back to mining Bitcoin, except for a few core Namecoin developers or just supporters. And then it would take like months before they will get to the next difficulty change, and then it will repeat, because at the next difficulty change, the difficulty will drop like incredible amount, and then it'll become a lot more profitable to mine Namecoin, and the Bitcoin miners come back. So, and then they were forced to do merge mining because of this. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work as a coin. And then in August of 11, an anonymous person launched Xcoin. What he did was, basically Xcoin is an exact clone of Bitcoin. He didn't change anything. I think he generated a new Genesis block. I'm not sure. And then he ran it himself for like 4 months so that he could mine 580,000 coins. So, and then after he mined 580,000 coins by himself, he launched it publicly and told everyone, this is the next hottest thing. It actually was kind of popular in the beginning. People were like, oh, cool, I can mine Xcoin on my CPU. Or they can mine Xcoin instead of Bitcoin and just have fun playing around with it. But soon afterwards, someone was saying like, this pre-mine thing is BS. So they want to relaunch Xcoin with zero pre-mine, and for some silly reason, they decided to call it IO coin, O to stand for zero pre-mine. And this was launched like 4 days later, actually. So this happened pretty fast. Someone forked Xcoin, launched it, and there were quite a few people supporting it, but because of such a bad name and it just didn't really take off. I think IO coin is still around. There's actually a new IO coin that's like input-output coin, which is different than this one. But I think this one is still around. I think Xcoin is also still around. And then soon after that, like a couple weeks later, someone launched Solidcoin. Solidcoin actually has a pretty cool name. It's easy to remember. It's a fork of Bitcoin. So same thing. He mined 30,000 so coins himself before he launched it. It tried out something different, which is 3-minute block time, so it's faster. And it did fix fees. The guy who launched it decided that Bitcoin's fee per kilobyte was too confusing for the average user. So he's like, every transaction costs one solid coin. And obviously that doesn't work because someone created like a huge transaction, only paid one solid coin. And the coin got attacked by spam because of this. And he was forced to shut it down because the coin just didn't work. And he relaunched it as Solid Coin 2. I'll go into that in a little bit. Next came Geistgeld. I have no idea what that means. It's built on top of Multicoin, which is a project that lets you build multiple different coins out of this source code. He pre-mined, so this is the first coin that actually did a pre-mine, which is just the first block or a few blocks had 7 million coins in it, and then he launched it. So he didn't actually like run this client for like a few months to to mine coins himself. He actually just put it into the Genesis block. And then it also has 15 seconds blocks, which is really fast. And he was experimenting with this, and this had really high orphan rates because of the 50-second blocks. So people were mining blocks that were conflicting with each other and then orphaning each other. And soon after that, the same person launched Tenebricks. So it also contained the 7.7 million coins pre-mine, has 5-minute blocks, and the inflation schedule was just 50 coins rewards indefinitely. And this is the first coin that actually did the script proof of work. So this coin brought about the innovation of being able to mine on a CPU because at that point in time, Bitcoin was mined on a GPU. So I play around with this. It's actually pretty cool to be able to mine coins on your computer. But the problem with this is the pre-mine, right? It's 7.7 million coins pre-mine, which is a lot. So soon after that, people were saying, let's fork off Tenebricks and create a fair Tenebricks. So that's how Fairbricks was born. Fairbricks was launched like a week and a half later, and it was actually created by myself. So someone was looking for a developer to create Fairbricks, and I just volunteered to just play around with it, and I created it. No pre-mine. Unfortunately, Fairbricks was plagued by various bugs in the multi-coin source code. A lot of blocks were mined without any block rewards because of some bug. So right after this, well, let's talk about Solidcoin version 2. Solidcoin V2 was launched by this guy who launched Solidcoin. He forked Bitcoin. He decided to not open source it. Centralized mining of every other block by supernodes. So he has some more control over what's going on so it can't be attacked. And he also added a 5% tax for what he called CPF, Coin Protection Fund or Coin Promotion Fund. So a lot of this sounds like what Dash is doing right now. And this coin was it was a mess because the creator was kind of like a dictator, and he was just it didn't really fly. So this was the environment where I launched Litecoin. So why did I create Litecoin? It was an excuse to kind of learn the Bitcoin code. I played around with it while creating Fairbricks, and I decided that I can actually create an altcoin that's better than what's out there, right? And lastly, it was just a lot of fun to actually play around with the Bitcoin source code and to launch something. So talk a bit about the design of Litecoin. So I decided to use script proof of work because I realized you can't compete with Bitcoin for miners. As we saw with Namecoin, it just doesn't work. And also CPU mining is actually quite a bit of fun. So, and then I decided to use 2.5 minutes, seeing how well it worked with Solidcoin. Fast blocks actually makes it really easier to use. if anyone's ever like, I'm sure you guys have used coins that have like 2.5 minutes or even 1 minute block times. It's just a lot easier than Bitcoin, right? You don't need the security of a 10-minute block where you can still wait 10 minutes. If you wait 4 blocks in Litecoin, it's just as secure. But if you just get one, it's good enough. Like it's really hard to reverse one confirmation. And of course, you can't go too fast because then it becomes really inefficient. And lastly, I want to do a fair launch, no pre-mine. I realize people really hate pre-mine, instant mines, post-mines, whatever. So I want to try to make it as fair as possible, and also want to keep it as simple as possible. I want to keep the code base basically Bitcoin with very few changes so that I can, in the future, merge in all the Bitcoin improvements without a lot of work and all the bug fixes, obviously. So, like the Fairbricks being forked off of Multicoin had all these issues that weren't in Bitcoin. So I wanted to make sure that keep it as simple as possible. And lastly, a good name is important, and marketing. So that's how I actually took quite a while to come up with the name Litecoin. And once I thought of that name, it kind of stuck. It was pretty simple, kind of makes sense. And also the silver to Bitcoin's gold analogy was great, if I can say so myself. The Litecoin code, the original code is still on GitHub, my personal repository, kobly/litecoin-ode. And the latest code is Litecoin project -Litecoin if you guys want to take a look. So since this is code school, I'm going to go a little bit into the code. So these are like the changes I had to make for Litecoin. It actually wasn't that hard to create Litecoin because it's very close to Bitcoin. I made a few changes. So the first thing is to make Litecoin address starts with L instead of 1 for Bitcoin to differentiate it to. I don't know if you guys know, the reason why Bitcoin address starts with a 1 is because it uses base 5658 encoding, and it prepends a 0 in the beginning. And then when you base 56 encode it, that 0 becomes a 1. For Litecoin, in order to have address start with an L, I prepend 48, or in hex, it's 30. If you prepend 30, that base 58 encoding makes it so that the first letter is always an L. So that's how like different coins can have different starting letters. So pretty simple fix change for Litecoin, as you can see. 2.5 minute blocks. So I understood Satoshi's reasoning for like Bitcoin's reward schedule where rewards get halved every 4 years, because he wanted to give enough time for Bitcoin to flourish. So you can't cut the rewards too quickly. So he gives it like 4 years for every halving. So I think it gives Bitcoin like 40 years or something before fees really need to take over the reward. So I didn't want to change the reward schedule, but I want to make the block times faster. So to do that, I had to increase the total number of coins to 84 million. So it's the same thing. Blocks happen every 2.5 minutes, 50 coins per block, and every 4 years, reward gets halved. So this is basically the only change I had to do. And difficulty changes every 2.5 days as opposed to every 2 weeks because of this. Yeah, and as you've seen with other coins like Dogecoin, who would try to like muck with this reward schedule, if you make the reward halve too fast, then the coin becomes unsustainable because there's not enough transaction fees to pay the miners, and then they were forced to merge mine with Litecoin because of that. So script proof of work, I copied this from Tenebricks. So the difference is when for Bitcoin you hash the block header with SHA-256 twice, and then you take that hash and you in order for it to be valid, it has to have a lot of leading zeros, right? So that's how, if you understand how Bitcoin hashing works. So for Litecoin, instead of doing SHA-256, here I'm just doing a script hash of the block header. And if that number has a lot of zeros, is below the target, then it's a valid block. So because of this, if you look at Bitcoin blocks, the block ID of Bitcoin blocks all start with a lot of zeros. But if you look at Litecoin blocks, the block IDs don't start with a lot of zeros. That's because the block IDs are actually using SHA-256D, whereas the difficulty is using script. So it's an interesting thing with Litecoin. If you actually go to an Explorer and look at blocks, the IDs don't start with a lot of zeros. So one of the hardest things for launching Litecoin back then was creating the Genesis block. These days, there's probably a lot of how-tos to create Genesis blocks, or even just tools that help you do it. But back then, it was actually really hard because Satoshi wasn't around, so he was the only person that created a Genesis block. So it was, I think I emailed Gavin and asked him, is there code available for creating Genesis block? And he pointed me to a piece of code that Satoshi had that was checked in actually that wasn't checked in, that was just available somewhere. And I looked at it. It's basically just mining, right? It's just changing the nonce and then keep mining until you find a block that is below the difficulty. The other thing is, if you notice up here, Satoshi put the quote, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks" in the Genesis block to kind of date stamp the block. So I switched that to a quote that's about Steve Jobs dying. To date stamp Litecoin as that. So Litecoin actually has this quote embedded in the Genesis block. And this is the code for generating the Genesis hash. So I ran this myself. It took, I think, 3-4 hours on my computer to find the Genesis block for Litecoin. And lastly, I wanted to do a fair launch. So basically I asked myself, in order for it to be a fair launch, everyone has to be able to, I had to pre-announce this, but I can't kind of give away the Genesis block, right? I can't let people mine on it before the actual launch date. So I released the source in binary almost a week before launch, so people can actually play around with mining. And I also used a forum poll for people to select which time of 4 that they want to launch. They want Litecoin to launch, and the final, the winner is actually a very inconvenient time for me. But I guess I had to respect what people wanted. And then I also withheld the Genesis block. I'll talk about this in a little bit. So I made it so that people can test on testnet, but they can't mine the actual mainnet blockchain. And at launch, I made it so that it's very easy for someone to restart their node so that they can start mining right away. And I'll show you how I did this. So first, I made the Genesis block a secret. So I created a Genesis block, but I didn't put the end time and end nonce. So basically, the time is the time the Genesis block was created, and the nonce is what you increment to find the block where the hash is less than the target, right? So I withheld these two numbers and made it so that these two numbers can be passed in as a configuration parameter. So without those two numbers, if you have the source code, you don't know what the Genesis block is. So you can't really build what I'm afraid of is people building a long chain when they know the Genesis block, and then when I launch it, they just publicize their chain and override the actual chain, right? So, and then I also lock in the Genesis block. So as you can see, I have the hash for the Genesis block, and if the first block is not that, then it basically fails. The client will fail. And then I also made it so that testnet chain cannot go higher than 10,000 blocks, because I was also afraid that people may just run testnet and then decide that that's what they want to call Litecoin, and then I would have no control, because then they would just go with it because the code is already out there. So I made it so that testnet will actually die. And here it's code that basically says if you're not running on, if you don't have the Genesis block, then you have to run it on testnet. And right before the launch, I decided to troll everyone. So I've always been a troll. I posted this, and the link led to a Rickroll video. So it was, yeah, quite a bit of fun. And then when I actually launched Litecoin, all I did was made this post on Bitcoin Talk Forum. Right, this is the end time and end nonce for the Genesis hash, Genesis block. All people had to do was put this into their config file, restart the client, and then their client will be mining on mainnet right away. So because the source code and binary was released like almost a week before, people can actually compile from source. If they didn't trust my binary, they can test their computer mining Litecoin on testnet. So at launch, everyone, like 3 seconds later, could start mining. So this is the way how I made Litecoin as fair as possible. And a lot of coins copied and forked from Litecoin, but I don't know any single coin that actually did a launch this way to be as fair as possible. A lot of coins launched like they didn't want any pre-mine, so when they launched, they just created a post and they launched it. But as a user, you actually had to compile from source if you don't trust them, which takes hours, and then run it, so you'll be already hours behind everyone else. Or you can just run the binary they provide, and it could be malicious or it could be doing something bad, right? So all that was, I think, at that time, I thought I didn't want people to deal with. So I launched this binary and a source like almost a week before so people can test with it. So this is basically the Litecoin launch. And this, I'm just going to show you the price since launch. So in March 2013, like a year and a half after launch, Litecoin price broke dollar parity. And then it went to like $5, dropped back down, and then late 2013, early 2014, it actually pumped up to almost $50. And that was a huge pump when Bitcoin actually went to 1,000. And then since then, it's been dropping. And for the past like almost 2 years, it's been around $4, like very, very stable until yesterday. And who knows what will happen in the future, right? And this is the graph of Litecoin hash rate. So Litecoin with script is not ASIC proof, but it's ASIC resistant. So it makes ASIC more expensive to build. But when Litecoin price hit like $40, all of a sudden it became profitable. So people started building ASICs for Litecoin. And now it's dominated by these ASICs. As you can see, even though the price has been pretty stable the past like few years, the hash rate has been going up like significantly. And yeah, I think it'll just still go up. I think the security of Litecoin is quite impressive in terms of the market cap. And so why did Litecoin succeed? Various things. I think an easy to remember name, a good name is important. I think a good marketing strategy is important too. Like the silver to Bitcoin's gold it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because people start talking about Litecoin, they're like, oh, it's silver to Bitcoin's gold, and then it clicked and it became silver, right? And silver is also known as like the second place, right, in competition. So then Bitcoin and Litecoin became 1 and 2 in people's mind, and people started buying Litecoin. If it's not number 2, then it should be number 2, right? So people started buying Litecoin, and then once Litecoin has been known as silver, and Bitcoin is obviously gold. So other coins can't really brand themselves as silver because Litecoin is obviously silver. um, and but they can call themselves copper or bronze, but who the hell wants to be copper, right? And another thing is Litecoin became like an arbitrage coin for Bitcoin. So withdrawing and deposit fiat has always been hard, as we know. But Litecoin and Bitcoin are both easy to deposit and withdraw. So a lot of people want to trade, and trading Bitcoin, Litecoin just became very easy. So you can arbitrage between Bitcoin, Litecoin, and US dollar, like a three-way trade, very easily. And because Litecoin is practically on every exchange out there, it became a very good trading pair with Bitcoin. And one other thing is, Litecoin also got lucky where when Bitcoin mining went from GPUs to ASIC, all the Bitcoin GPUs were looking for a coin to mine, and Litecoin just happened to have transitioned from CPU to GPU at that time, and it just became the coin for Bitcoin GPUs to be mining. And I think lastly, a fair launch was really important. People just can get behind Litecoin because there's no shadiness behind it, and yeah, so I think that's why Litecoin succeeded. That's all I have for today. Any questions?
What is it, 4 or 5 years later, would you have changed anything? Like, do you have any regrets on how that launched at all?
Would I have changed anything?
Yeah, with the benefit of hindsight, like, what would you do differently, if anything?
I don't think so. I mean, I could have instant mined some coins, but if I did, I don't think Litecoin would be this popular, would have succeeded. So, yeah, I don't think so.
Who maintains Litecoin today, and how do they go about the decision-making process?
We have a team of like 4 or 5 developers that just we chat in Slack, and just kind of just decide to work together on it. So I don't necessarily run it as a dictatorship or anything like that. But it's kind of nice that that there is kind of the creator still here, unlike Bitcoin. So I can kind of steer Litecoin in the direction towards my vision for Litecoin. Whereas for Bitcoin, as you can see, without Satoshi around, everyone's using Satoshi's white paper as the Bible and saying Satoshi meant this. So for Litecoin, you can just come and ask me.
What is the vision?
You want to?
So you said you're steering Litecoin towards your vision. What is it?
My vision. So Litecoin has been, so the vision is always I wanted Litecoin to complement Bitcoin, not to compete. So I realized early on that because Bitcoin needed to be the most secure and most decentralized coin, it can't compromise on security and decentralization. And because of that, it cannot scale on chain like people wanted to, because it's a trade-off, right? So I envision Litecoin being able to find a different kind of sweet spot for security decentralization and transaction throughput and fees, right? So Bitcoin can be used for moving millions of dollars between banks, buying houses, buying cars. It's really secure. It's uncensorable for that. Litecoin can be used for cheaper things. And Litecoin and other coins can fulfill that need. And I think something like Lightning Network, being able to kind of combine the two, not combine the two, being able to interconnect the two coins so that you can go from Litecoin to Bitcoin very easily via Lightning, makes something like that very possible. That's why I'm pushing very hard for SegWit on Litecoin and Bitcoin, so that they both get Lightning, and then you can someone can pay someone in Litecoin and the receiver can actually receive Bitcoin, or vice versa. And because it's all interconnected, potentially you can even go through the Litecoin network for cheaper fees if that actually makes it cheaper. And the user doesn't have to know like what path it's taking for the best, fastest, and cheapest fees.
Can you comment on mining in Litecoin today? Is it still possible on a GPU, and how do you feel about the decentralization of it?
I think GPU mining is not profitable on Litecoin anymore. So it's mostly GPUs. It's mostly ASICs. A new ASIC actually came out a few months ago, made by Bitmain. And it's really efficient. And I think Silicon is also working on another like ASIC for Litecoin. So unfortunately, it is true that with ASICs, mining is a bit centralized, and a lot of it is in China. And with centralization comes centralized mining is pretty bad for Bitcoin and Litecoin because mining is supposed to be anonymous, where you don't know who the miners are, and they're all individually acting selfishly to protect or to make the money, which indirectly makes the coin secure. So with centralized mining, then there's a few parties where governments or malicious entities can actually approach those parties and coerce them into doing something bad for the coin, or even those parties can have different views that that's not good for the coin, but it's just very selfish of them to. They can actually control the network, which is bad. So I'm hoping that ASICs will become more of a commodity eventually, as we approach like the smaller nanometer chips. That will have more and more players creating the ASICs, and there will be less centralization. But I don't know if that will actually happen.
So are you going to advocate for a soft fork to lower the block size limit in Litecoin to help decentralization?
No. Litecoin doesn't have to be the most decentralized and secure network compared to Bitcoin. So I think right now Litecoin has 4 times the block size, effective block size, and I'm fine with that for now. I'm not seeing it being abused by anyone, so I don't see a problem with it. Yeah. You want to get a?
Do you think when do you think SegWit activation will happen with Litecoin, if at all?
I'm hoping soon. Like I said, because mining is kind of centralized today, it's kind of I have to convince a few Chinese pools to do it. And if I get these few Chinese pools to start signaling for SegWit, all of a sudden SegWit will activate. Right? It's like 3 people I need to convince. So, and I'm in talks with them all the time. They're unfortunately, like, Bitcoin politics have come into Litecoin a bit, and they're not. They support Litecoin, and they know that SegWit and Lightning is good for Litecoin, but they're kind of hesitant to support it because it undermines their position on Bitcoin. So, which is kind of silly, but it is what it is, and we have to deal with that today. Any more questions? Cool. Thank you.